Hello there, this is David from David Books and Comics, and today I want to show some of the archival reprint editions that I collected over the years. Right now you're looking at a blank cover. It used to have a dust jacket. This is a hardcover book called, let's get to the contents. See if I can find the title page. The Great Comic Book Heroes by Jules Feiffer. And now Jules Feiffer was a lover of comic book superheroes, obviously. He published this book as a response to his own interest in comic book superheroes, obviously. And he initially was an inker for Will Eisner on the Spirit comic book section that came out in the newspapers. Features an excellent introduction on the history of comic books. And this is one of the first books that I ever bought that actually collects color sections of the original comic books. The first being the Superman, of course, with the famous origin or partial two-page famous origin story, including a story by the original creators, Joe Shuster and Jerry Siegel. And then there's the Batman, and this is from Batman #1, the two-page origin story. And of course, there's Shazam, Captain Marvel, which doesn't do justice to how popular the character was back in the 1930s and 40s. There's the Human Torch, Green Lantern, and of course Hawkman. The more popular characters: Wonder Woman, Submariner, and Captain America. So that's the first time I ever started my interest in finding these archive editions. And anyway, so that's that one. But I also managed to buy, I should say, Batman. This is the archives. And of course, this has Detective Comics number 27, the first appearance. Original art by Bob Kane and so on. And of course, there's also The Spirit by Will Eisner. Now, the story of The Spirit, many of you know, Eisner and Will Eisner and Jerry Iger owned or established a comic shop where they hired different artists to work for them, and they would shop out the artwork to different companies like Quality Comics, Gilberton, who did the classic comics, and different Fox Features also hired some of these Quality Comics. Fiction House hired some of these Eisner artists to do artwork and stories for them. Anyway, so eventually the newspaper syndicate approached Will Eisner and asked that he create a comic book section. And the comic book section had 3 stories. One was his own creation, The Spirit, a 7 to 8 page story of his adventures. And then there would be another 7 to 8 page story of the adventures of a character called Mr. Mystic, created by an artist named Bob Powell. And then there would be a 4-page story featuring a superheroine called Lady Luck. The initial story was drawn by Chuck Mazzugian. So anyway, this is, I've collected, since I really like, many people like the spirit stories. I collected the first 4 archive editions. So that's that one. And then you have, of course, volume 2. Beautiful covers. And this is volume 3, which this story is actually featured in the Jules Pfeiffer book, Great Comic Book Heroes. And this is volume 4. And but I also collected some of the early, and I've had this one for years. These are the early Lady Luck stories. She's a superheroine that appeared in the back pages of the spirit section, comic books from the newspapers. And these are stories by, as it says here, Klaus Nordling, who was one of the more popular and major contributors to the Lady Luck stories. So that's what that looks like. And then there's this issue, which features some of the earliest work by the artist Chuck Mazzugian. But it also has art by Nick Cardy, who was in those days called Nicholas Vicardi, and more art by Klaus Nordling. So that's that. And I also have collected issues and editions of Batman, of course. There's this issue, which collects the early Batman stories. This is from Batman #1, and that's it's called the Dark Knight Archive. And if you want the Detective Archives, you'd have to go to this one. This is volume 1. This is the Detective Comic Archives, which features the first appearance of Batman. And I also, this is all according to my own interests, this is the Black Canary that appeared in the pages of Flash comics, along with the Flash and Hawkman. Initially, she was a super villainess, or a villainess, that appeared in the pages of Johnny Thunder. And Johnny Thunder was a superhero in Flash comics. Eventually, the villainess became one of the lead features in Flash comics, and basically took over the strip, the Johnny Thunder strip, and became the lead character. Anyway, so there you go. And became the Black Canary strip. The artwork was done by Carmine Infantino, actually, drawing in a style similar to there was a art style that was Milton Caniff art style. Anyway, so that's Black Canary. And of course, Wonder Woman. And of course, we know the story of Wonder Woman. It was a character created by William Moulton Marston. He would sign his name as Charles Moulton, and you know he was a psychiatrist. And the art was done by a guy named H.G. Peter. And according to Trina Robbins, Peter drew the art style in these adventures in a kind of ancient Greek art style. So there you go. That's Wonder Woman. And Marvel's equivalent of Wonder Woman is her. This is Venus. The character was created by Bill Everett. And this is a limited edition of Venus with an excellent introduction by Dr. Michael J. Vasillo. He's a dentist, but also an expert in Golden Age comics. Initially, the strip was aimed at a more of a teenage type audience. Eventually, as the strip evolved, it became more fantasy and mystery with elements of love, and in the later stories, horror. So that's Venus. And then there's also of course, Dr. Fate. And this features again an introduction by Roy Thomas. This came out in 2006, 2005. And all drawn by the same artist. Great stories. So that's Dr. Fate. And of course, you can have, there's also Simon and Kirby's work on the Sandman. And this is one of the least expensive archive editions actually to get. But a good sampling of what it was like to read comic books in the Golden Age. Kirby was really one of the most expressive artists. This is one of his best Golden Age inventions, was the Sandman. Anyways, so that's Sandman. And of course, you also have Hawkman, the Golden Age Hawkman. And it features the art of Sheldon Moldoff. He was one of the major artists on Hawkman. This is Neville. Neville's initial work on the character, and then Shelley Moldoff went and drew the character after Neville left. And he drew in a style similar, according to him, he drew in a style that was similar to Alex Raymond, who was his main inspiration for his own artwork. And you can tell by the level of detail and in the faces and the way he drew Hawkman, the influence of Alex Raymond. So that's that. But I also managed to collect the archive editions of The Phantom Lady. And the Phantom Lady, Started out in the pages of Police Comics, and that's what this reprints. Excellent introduction. A picture of, that's Matt Baker, by the way. And that's his most famous, iconic cover. And this is the Arthur Petty, the first incarnation of Phantom Lady, as drawn by Arthur Petty, from Police Comics #1. It also features artwork by, early artwork of Joe Kubert. And that is actually Joe Kubert's artwork. Vastly different from what it is today. So that's the Quality Comics. That's the first incarnation of Phantom Lady. And then when she went to Fox Features, she was drawn by none other than Matt Baker. And this is one of the iconic covers from the Golden Age. One of the good girl art covers of Phantom Lady. And the artwork, this is Baker. Some people say otherwise, but this is Matt Baker, as inked more than likely by Alex Blum. How I know it's Baker is because he actually signed it, Matt Baker. As you see here, likely inked by Alex Blum. Both him and Baker worked in the Eisner-Iger shop in around the same time period. So that's Baker's work. Cover is debatable whether that's Baker or not. That's probably Blum. This is Matt Baker. This is his style, art style. These reprint editions tend to use, obviously, facsimiles of the original comic books, the way they're done. So this archive edition comes in a slipcase. This is volume 1, volume 2, and volume 3. And this is the Ajax Feral version of Phantom Lady. And yeah, this starting here. So that's that. That's volume 3. So that's it. Oh yes, and of course, in the 50s, Simon and Kirby came out with this. This is the Fighting American. And this came out in the 1950s. And I believe this is Prize Comics Company. As an introduction by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby. So this is the Fighting American. Okay, so I think that's all the archive editions that I currently have. I have more actually, but there's more that I have for different characters. But anyway, those are the ones I'll show for now. So if you enjoy this little presentation on my archive editions, please give me that like, and thanks everyone for subscribing, and feel free to comment. I know those of us who have good expensive comic books and don't like wrecking our original comic books still have access to be able to read our comic books in not just on the computer, but in actual hard copy editions, reprint editions. Some of them are great reproductions, especially the Spirit ones, which are great reproductions of the original artwork. And which feature also excellent introductions by the people who were inspired by these artists and writers who created these original comic book superheroes. Anyway, so thanks everyone again for subscribing, and thanks for all the comments, and for watching these videos. Thanks. Bye.